Sup, guys? Today I am giving a talk called Better JavaScript for Better People, like yourselves, becoming better people. So, in reality, this is an ES6 talk. We're talking about some of the cool things you can do in ES6. So we'll get started. Var versus let. So if we look here, this is what worse people do. So actually, these output very different things. I'll just ask, does anyone know what the expected output of this one is? Correct. And what's the expected output of this one? So in ES6 we've added const and let. Const and let are both block scoped, while var is function scoped or globally scoped if it's in the global. So really the var bar that you decide to find in that block over there is the same bar that is up there because it's function scoped, and that's usually not what you want. So let and const are good things, and that's why we've become better people. Const is also constant, if that wasn't clear. Where let, you can mutate the variable. Yes, this is what I just talked about. Arrow functions. So this is the worst kind of people. That actually should say worst people. So really the output of this is, as expected, nan. Lots of nans, because they can't be what you want. Each function has its own this. So this function, this that you pass in the map, that has its own this. It's not the this in foobar. So these are also worse people. Worse people decide to get around this by assigning this to some variable, like other, and then they reference that in their function. And that's how you had to do it, because, well, each function had their own this. Now we have arrow functions. So if we run this, that's what you want. This is also what you want. So see, I used an arrow function in this one, and I could just use this. But that's because the arrow functions are just anonymous functions where they lexically bind this, which is great. We like this. We like this functionality. We are better people now. Classes. Well, there's a scroll bar there. All right. So, worse people. That's not even right. Okay. So worse people would use the function syntax. Worse people. Yes. It's wrong. I know. I just noticed. Okay. It's very wrong. It runs right because I updated where it ran. I'm writing my talk right before I do it. Don't check it beforehand. So that should actually be at the last line. Should be var my foovar equals new foovar, like it is right there. But anyway, both these functions. But in ES6, we've added classes. This class syntax, it exists now. It is still prototype based. It is syntax sugar for what you are already doing, for the most part. Don't be confused. Don't think you are doing something different. You're not. But if there's syntax sugar. Yes? What does the prototype base mean different from the class? So the way OO really works in JavaScript is when you, so I'll go back here. This will actually explain it. So what I'm doing here is I'm defining a function and assigning values to this. And then there's the prototype, which I'm assigning this function to. When I if I do a new of this object, when that function is called there, if it can't find it on the object itself, it will look up into the prototype of the function and then call the function. And that's how it works. Template strings. So worse people will do that, where they just they use the plus operator to add their strings together with some value, and that will function. But it's still, you're a worse person. Now we have template strings. Now you can be better. So, yes, that's yes. So that allows you to use string interpolation. Also allows for multi-line strings. There we go. It runs. So that's the syntax for string interpolation in there. Um, yes. So there is rest and spread. So if you see in this example over here with these really contrived functions that don't really do anything useful, over here I have a function that will return the number of arguments. I use the arguments object, which is on any function, and call .length on it, and that functions. And for this other one, I have an array of values, and I pass them in individually, and it sums them up, and that functions, I suppose. Yes. Yes. But yeah. So yes, you can. So in this instance, we use .y, which is the spread operator, which allows. So in this case, we'll add for rest parameters. So rest parameters. So that is all the parameters that would be passed into that function as an array. Arguments, on the other hand, is not an array. It's an array-like object. It has length. That's about it. So you have an actual array. So in this case, instead, we can just do that and call .length on this array. In this case, when I use the spread operator on the array and pass it into sum, it will then basically unpack this array and put them into each of these different values. And it functions. And it's great. And we like this because we're better people, as I've reminded you several times. Yes.
If you only have one argument, so you just pass in one, would it be an array of one element, or would it be just, would y be one?
Oh, so if you press an array to numargs just on its own?
Or no, if you just pass in a single element.
A single element, it will be an array of single element. Well, if you use the operator, it will always be an array. Cool. Destructuring. So these are things you can now do in JavaScript. So over there, basically, that is equivalent to what I wrote about. So you can, in using array syntax, basically, just assign variables in an array to other values, like so. You can also do it with objects. In the first example, that's using names, so you can change so this is the key that it is in the object over here, and that's the value is the variable you want it to be stored to. You can also, if you don't add the colons, it will function just like that. And you can also be the parameters of a function, so you can do it similarly as I've shown right there. Yes.
What's the length in the second?
It means you don't want to assign anything to so you don't want to assign to anything. So if you don't actually want all the values in the array, you can do that. It's possible. You just don't include an element there.
So it would be a and b, and the second expression is.
So yeah, these will just create const, because I use const. We'll create. It's basically equivalent of writing const a equals 1 and const b equals 3, or element at 0 and element at 2. That's basically all it does. The first one. Yes, the one I talked about. Cool. Modules. We do have modules in JavaScript now with ES6. I know most people have probably used something from Node, just CommonJS way of doing it, probably in the past. Now there's one built into the language itself. Woo. So the way it kind of works is you have your imports and your exports. It's basically the equivalent in CommonJS for the top one is kind of just var express equals require express. That will import from the default, because there is the default exports and named exports. So the second line will take all of your named exports, which you create by use kind of word. This is an example of a named export. This is an example of a default export. To use default will be referenced. So basically, if I had a bunch of named export, import star as potato from my.potato, you will have an object potato and potato.mynumber if that was the file. Potato.mynumber would equal 0, potato dot whatever else I had will equal whatever else it equals. Yes? Oh, sorry. No. You would just get the stars potato would get you the named exports on the object potato. I don't think it's on default. I'm not positive actually, but because the way the default export work is it's technically a named export called default. And there's basically syntax sugar for getting that one. I'm not positive. So I'd have to reread through the spec to figure that out because Babel doesn't exactly do it correctly. Anyway, moving on. The next import statement, if I had some named export POW, it would import POW from that module and not import anything else that was in it. So, this is an example of doing a default export. Just export default, whatever you want, that will be on the default export. Yes?
But with the third line, that would still be available under math.pow, not pow, as we talked about earlier?
No, because the default export is technically still a named parameter a named export, but it's just titled default. So when you import everything, you're not really importing the So for example, when I'm doing this, I'm not importing the default one. I'm importing all the named exports.
Oh, so I'm just getting that named export.
Yes.
So are you saying you would break it if you had a named export called default?
That would be actually defining the default export. Those would be equivalent.
Okay.
Technically.
Types of potato, this is default type of potato.
Yes.
What's the difference between line 1 and line 3?
Line 1 and line 3. So let's say this is importing the default export from the express whatever it is. This is importing a named export called POW from So named exports are referenced by their name. Like this, if I use this, the named export of this is my number. Default do not require names and can be imported as whatever.
So for example, you say import my number in curly braces from whatever, and that would get you that my number, whereas import express from whatever would just get you the default function.
Correct. Yes. I did not make enough examples for this one, but that's okay. Promises. I'm sure most of you have heard of promises. They're something that's been around for a while, mostly. Promises, they are the new and improved way of dealing with callback how, even though it's not always as beneficial as you think you are. But it works. So right here, I'm making a new promise that will for the set timeout to resolve will resolve and for a certain duration. So when I call it here, timeout, that's going to return a promise. So then promises are identical. And so when that happens, I handle it this way and then return another timeout. So then that one I handle here, throw a new error. And then if there's also a catch block on promises, which you can catch. So any error thrown throughout the way of a promise chain will then go to catch. Yes?
So does that block with JavaScript runtime, or does that evaluate and skip through? How does this exactly work?
So no, this will all be evaluated, and then So when you call this, these functions will be called when they're done, and it will just keep going through the event loop. So
I guess if I had console.log right after that block,
that will probably be called before timeout 2000.
Okay.
So no. Yes?
Out of curiosity, can you have multiple catch functions applied that will get called through an error, or will only the first one get called?
It will hit the first catch function. So you can still return promises from here and then continue the chain continue to go down, but it will hit the first catch function it sees. and just do that one, I believe. Yes. Yeah, so like if I put a catch right here, like in here, that's not in this one, if this one throws, that catch will be called first. Yes. But once it hits the catch, it's done. Like a catch, I guess. Iterators and for of. So now we have the concept of iterators. I guess first it would be nice to talk about symbols. Symbols exist. Basically, they allow access control in a way, sort of, on JavaScript on object state. So basically, like if you use a symbol key outside of the scope of creating the object, you will not be able to get the data that's in there. It's unless you use the reflection APIs, which I'll get to later. So this iterator will basically do the Fibonacci sequence. It starts with these two values, uses the destructuring to make the assignment, then returns the value, and not done. And we'll continue. Then I can use for of, which is how you would iterate over a iterator. And basically what it does is if n is greater than 1,000, it'll break and then just console log again. Yes, that's the next slide. So, generators. Yes. In ES6 generators are technically defined by the special type of function that allows you to yield different values and pretty much will handle a lot of this for you. A generator is a type of iterator, I guess would be a nice way to put it. So in this case, we go through, we increment the values, and then we yield the value that we want. So then when I do the same thing over it, it will do the same thing. Does that make sense? Proxies. Proxies are, well, proxies allow for us to basically look into what's going on and overwrite what's happening. So basically what I've done here is, in this example, has made it so that anytime someone calls an accessor on this object here that I'm making as a proxy, if the value is not in there, it will return 37. So this adds a lot of interesting metaprogramming funness that you can do, since you have these for most operations that are possible, like setting an object in a, you can do this for set, applying, a lot of other different things. And it all of a sudden now makes it so that you can't guarantee if when you call a function, or when you call an accessor, that it's now an O of 1 operation. It could theoretically be a function now, which is fun. Yes? What I've done right here is effectively method missing. Effectively. It effectively will function similarly. Yes, we have these now. We also have reflect, which is basically the opposite of proxies. It allows you to specifically call the different things that the proxy object allows you to define, which is neat, I guess. But it's scary and fun, and I guess. So where are we? ES6 is finalized. Woo! Hoopla! It was finalized in June, I believe. Where some of these features may work in your browser of choice or in Node. Not all of them. To get the most support, you should probably use something like Babel or the latest preview build of Edge, which I think has the most support of anything right now. More than Babel, actually. Babel is basically a transpiler and compiler and build system for JavaScript. So they have a lot of ES6 support. So basically, they have a ES6 to ES5 compiler or transpiler, that has a lot. That's what people used. Yes.
You mentioned that symbols allow for access control.
Yeah.
Specifically through just not sharing the symbol because they're guaranteed.
Yeah.
But why can't I just grab it out of the object key?
Can you? Like, I don't think does it?
Object keys are fully object.
Because you can get them through the Reflect API, but
Well, if you use that reflect,
you can't get the value within them. So
but it's okay. But I have reference to the same symbol, so I could just use it.
if you try to access using that symbol, it will return undefined outside the scope. I think that's the only point of symbols, unless there's another point of symbols. But the only real feature of them is that anything defined using it is not accessible outside. They also have a description, I guess, and a name. So yes. Any questions? I said a lot of things. Yes.
Are there any like tutorials or places I should go to learn or try ES6?
I would recommend first of just going to probably the Babel website. They really have all the features of ES6 really pretty well documented, and since it implements most of them, it says which ones it doesn't, like proxy, which it can't.
Should I just do node development at that point?
Yeah, you can. They actually have a browser compiler, which I'm actually using for this talk. But to run the ES6 examples that I showed you before, uses that. But yeah, probably just Node. Yes.
Can I is like ES6 still like can I do all the things in JavaScript like now in ES6?
Yes.
Will there be certain issues or backwards compatibility issues?
I think everything's fine. I think you can write the JavaScript you know and love today. Tomorrow. Any other questions? Cool. Yes, Nick.
Does ES6 change anything about use strips? I thought I heard something about that, but I could be wrong.
Not that I know of. I think it's okay. Cool. Yeah. Yes.
I believe it's implied if you use module syntax, but don't quote me on that. They
Oh.
talk about this especially when we import through the script tag.
Okay.
But both is module tag, but I'm not sure what happened to that in development, so don't hold me to it.
Okay. Cool. Yay.